My work in progress, The Longing of the Stranger Whose Path Has Been Broken, a rather long title comparing to the previous one, explores the liminal moments in the Bedouin community of St. Catherine, a historical area in South Sinai, Egypt, protected by its indigenous population, the Bedouin community, questioning the idea of belonging and finding our place in the world that may have been taken from us, while working collaboratively with members in the community, depicting how they have kept their way of life and traditions alive, yet embraced the modern world. As a documentary photographer, I respect the importance of elaborating our why, our intent. Why are we working on any project? But I never really focused on using my story of why within the practice itself. I acknowledge how important it is for me to stay connected to the St. Catherine community and the wish to create a photographic project that would make justice of the importance of their existence. But I never dug further, never considered my part of the story to be part of the actual narrative, only a motivation to start the project. Never have I thought that my story and the purpose behind starting this project would become the lead line to construct the visual narrative and language of the entire practice, which is basically what I've been investigating during this module. In order to explain how I reached this conclusion and my decisions on the focused approach in my current work in progress, I need to reflect on the inward journey that I took throughout this module, which has led me to the approach, visual language, and focus within the current practice. I've started this module with the concept of co-creating visuals with members of the Bedouin community, whom I have strong connections with. These visuals would highlight the tradition and modernity within the community, which in return would challenge colonial perspectives on native communities of Egypt. A concept that I'm fully convinced of, yet I see the lack of depth within its narrative and visual interpretation. I came into this module with a set of visuals that look really cool for social media as requested by contributors, but look very basic, flat, and unsatisfying for a photographic project. I thought maybe the quantity of those visuals would increase its weight photographically, comparing to Ed Ruscha's collections of petrol stations. Furthermore, even though I saw myself as the right person to be doing this project because of my personal connection to the people, I still felt a sense of unease, which is amplified by the additional lack of control on my visual language. From the beginning of this module, I was encouraged to go back to archives, whether to try out rephotography or mashups, or maybe use archival photographs from the occupation to remix with present imagery. In all cases, I became intrigued with the past archives, interviews, stories, and past visual data. I think for the first time since I started to take photos of this community, not just 10 months ago when I started this program, but more than 10 years ago, I think that this was the first time I feel it's okay to look back at old work as part of archives and development. It felt like I got permission to look back rather than just make new work in order to develop my practice, and that was very liberating. Considering my target to collaboratively work with members of the community, I felt positively overwhelmed with the response of the community, yet frustrated with the outcome. Learning about the different collaborative and participatory approaches helped in my reference and methodologies. In Louvere's assisted self-portraits, you could see how each contributor is controlling their photograph. Even the small detail of holding the trigger in their hand emphasizes this approach. But how did Louvere manage to co-create a series of visuals of contributors who are not photographers but apparently had full control on the photographic process, yet still managed to create a consistent series that is harmonious in visual language and artistic approach? I really enjoy being part of the photographic process, being directed by my contributors to take the photograph. They decide on where, what, and how the photograph will be taken, but I'm the one who's taking it, yet I still don't like the outcome. But would giving the camera to the contributors to take the photographs themselves, as Ewald and Louvere did, solve the issue of frustrating outcomes? In Louvere's assisted photographs, there were many consistent details: the angle of the camera, the size of the shot, and how the photograph is mounted in an exhibition space, implying a unified visual language that Louvere has created, maybe in discussion with contributors, but in reality he remained the author of this visual language. This is when I realized the difference between authorship and collaborative approaches. I've been introduced to performed portraits by Tanya Habjuka, another format of collaborative approaches where Tanya has interviews with subjects or contributors before collaboratively agreeing on a way to visually illustrate their story. The contributor performs and Tanya photographs, resulting in stunning and sincere imagery. Although I love the collaborative sense in Tanya's approach, I don't want my contributors perform to illustrate their story. Jim Goldberg invites his contributors to annotate his prints, providing personal commentaries on their own economic and social situations, their concerns about the world, and what they thought of Goldberg's photographs. There is no doubt about the beauty and meaning in Goldberg's imagery, but I believe what gave the work a sort of edge or value was the additions by the contributors and Goldberg's acknowledgement of their voice within the work. Echoing Arya Azuli's notes on the act of reflecting upon the looking, archiving, and the taking of photographs. But how do I invite the community's voice without speaking on their behalf? How do I control the authorship of the visual language? When is the community's voice enough, and when should I include mine? I decided to do this project because I feel very connected to St. Catherine and its Bedouin people. My Bedouin ancestry, which I have no proof of, my childhood memories in the mountains, and my volunteer work with the locals became threads of connections. Digging deeper onto the root cause of this urge to stay connected to St. Catherine, I narrow my reflections down to one word: belonging. I'm not doing this project because I belong in St. Catherine. I'm doing this project because I want to belong in St. Catherine and the Bedouin people, who know where they belong to yet struggle to keep that alive due to the economic and social situation. This part of the story, this duality, and the inward-outward reflections of belonging became the starting point to build up a narrative. I'm very interested in the involvement of members in the community. At the same time, I want to be the author of the visual language. Because my voice in this narrative became an important intro into the lives of the Bedouin community, I want to use it as the voice for metaphors and inward reflections. The contributor's voice also became important to outward reflections in the narrative through the liminal and intimate moments, which connects with the social and economic situations in South Sinai. Additionally, I'm inviting the contributors to view the work in progress and comment with poetry from Bedouin folklore or make up their own verses. Poetry in the Bedouin culture is an art, a language, a way to tell stories without filters, and it is embedded in the Bedou blood. The new title of the project is a translated verse from one of the poetry collected from contributors, addressing myself in metaphors within the narrative and addressing myself as a stranger within the Bedou context, which freed me from the insecurity to move forward. With this narrative, I felt that I needed to go back and look at my old work differently, picking hidden metaphors, new edits, and a new context as I dig deeper rather than wider in order to create more layers and depth within the narrative, which is something that I aim to keep developing furthermore. I've been able to build up a number of lines for the narrative. One, using my story in metaphors of identity and belonging. Two, tracing this with the intimate moments, the liminal, the quick, unnoticed moments in the lives of the Bedouin community, collaboratively with contributors. Three, inevitably challenging the colonial perspectives as I highlight the tradition and modernity in the Bedou contemporary life. 4. Connecting belonging and present moments with the economic and social situation of the Bedou with their history of struggle and adaptation, linking this back again to my history without emphasizing the self too much. Considering this, I developed a synopsis that can be seen in my CRJ and Work in Progress portfolio, which includes new work and redefined old work. Moving forward, I'm considering the possibilities of maybe using each line as sections in the final project, multimedia installations in an exhibition format, using poetry commentary, sound, and items collected from contributors as part of this installation. Maybe create a section where I focus on specific items, possibly natural elements to investigate on specific lines, elements that symbolize the social and economic situation of the contemporary Bedou, looking at Tyrone Simon's investigative approach as inspiration. Simon's in-depth approach and ability to tell so many layers in very simple ways motivates me to take my time to develop my narrative and my investigative approaches based on historical documents, archives, interviews, and further assets I collect. I've been wanting to create an alternative narrative of the Bedouin community in St. Catherine, but instead I created an alternative narrative of myself.